Okay, good afternoon. Hello everybody, and welcome to the first in a new series of webinars that we're going to be running over the coming weeks, looking at Infor10 and the Infor10 solution, Infor10 Financials business. This first session is really just an introduction and a short overview of, I guess, some of the new functionality, some of the new things that are available in the Infor10 solution. We will be drilling down on a lot of these things in the subsequent sessions in the webinar series. So this afternoon is really just to give you a flavour of some of the things that will be coming up. So my name is Richard Hughes. Joining me this afternoon on the webinar is Gary Waylett, and the organiser of this session is Emma Mitchell. So this is the agenda we will go through this afternoon. Hopefully we should be about 45 minutes in total, so we'll run through some slides with you first of all. There'll then be a solution demonstration, and then finally we will open the session up for some questions and answers at the end, where you'll have the ability and the chance to ask any questions regarding anything you may have seen during the demonstration or in relation to the slides. So what we'll do is we'll take a look at just some of the key features of the Infor10 solution, take a look at, very briefly, some of the things that are new, what are the enhancements compared to previous versions of SunSystems. We'll then just touch briefly on some of the things you may need to consider when thinking about implementing Infor10, and again, these are just general points. Some of them may be applicable if you're upgrading from a previous version. They may just be general points that are relevant for anybody. Okay, so that's the agenda. So what we will do first of all is just to maybe recap, I guess, some of the characteristics or some of the key features of the Infor solution, or the Infor financial solution, which is essentially SunSystems as it stands today. So the Infor10 solution is just as maybe the terminology is a little confusing, but effectively Infor10 is the latest release of SunSystems. It is what is effectively the version 6 platform, so this is the latest version of the platform. And I think what Infor have tried to do with this release is really to take everything that has traditionally been strong in the SunSystems product and then build on that. There have been enhancements in a number of different areas, but it really combines the traditional strengths of the SunSystems financials package, the multi-currency capabilities, multi-company, a unified ledger with multiple sets of books, the multi-language capabilities, and to really build on these and include, as we'll see, additional functionality in relation to enhancements on security, additional reporting functionality, and a lot of other things besides. So really, Infor10 is about functionality within the application, but more than anything else, it's an enhancement to the way in which the Infor solution can be deployed. There are a lot of enhancements on the technology and platform side, and again, we won't go into the technical details of all of these in this session, but we will be looking at some of these in greater detail in subsequent webinar sessions over the next few weeks. But essentially, the Infor10 release gives customers or potential customers really compatibility with the latest Microsoft platforms, whether we're talking about Microsoft database platforms, web servers, the operating systems themselves. This release has been built from the ground up with the objective of being compatible only with the latest Microsoft technologies and taking advantage of all of the security and functionality that those provide. Again, at a high level, one of the other key enhancements from a platform point of view is there's a new reporting engine for the standard listing type reports that sit within SunSystems. This is, of course, in addition to all of the usual vision reporting tools that you'll be familiar with. This is just a new easier to use, more powerful reporting engine for standard listing reports within SunSystems, things like the trial balance, the account listing, journal listing, so on and so forth, and we'll take a look at that later. Also, there's been a move towards web enablement. So web enablement means a couple of things. Perhaps most excitingly, what this new release brings is the ability to run full version of SunSystems completely inside a browser. So this, for example, eliminates in a lot of cases, the need to deploy things like terminal services, Citrix solutions for giving access to remote offices. So there's the ability, there's a new web client or new web-enabled version of the SunSystems client. This is, of course, again, in addition to the desktop client, the rich desktop client that you'll be familiar with. So it's really about choice and opening up the number of different ways in which SunSystems can be deployed. It can be either deployed exclusively as a web-based solution, as an exclusive desktop solution, or perhaps more realistically as a hybrid model combining the two different things. There's also integration with Microsoft SharePoint. So what this essentially means is that there is a new Infor portal, so this is called Infor Workspace, and Infor10 Workspace is essentially a single branded, streamlined, single point of entry for all of the Infor applications, and from this single portal you will be able to access SunSystems, the web clients, Vision, any other dashboards, widgets, those kinds of things. And finally, with the Infor10 release, there have been some major changes in relation to the integration capabilities. We still have SunSystems Connect for those who are familiar with SunSystems 5, the web service. For those who are on SunSystems 4, we have now a web service for integrating different applications. But we also have a new platform called Infor Ion, which, as we'll see later in this session, brings together a number of different things, including workflow, browser-based configuration of workflow around different events within SunSystems, alerts, customized alerts that can be triggered when certain things happen within the system, and then these can be sent out in the form of an email or as a pop-up alert to different users. And again, we will be going into the Infor Ion platform because it is essentially a platform in itself. We'll be going into that in more detail in one of the sessions to come. So I guess Infor10 combines two things: functionality within the application itself, enhancements, but also some major changes, as we've said, to the technology and the ways in which SunSystems can be deployed. So just, again, a little bit more detail, and as I have reiterated a number of times, we will be going into a lot of these things in more detail in the subsequent webinars, but from an application perspective, just building on those pillars of SunSystems Multicurrency, we now have the ability to record 4 unique currency dimensions for every transaction. So in addition to our usual transaction currency base or operating currency, we have a third reporting currency, which could be a completely different currency, and we have a fourth variable currency, which again could be used as a second reporting currency or for some other consolidation purposes. So we have the ability to record in real time up to 4 different currency values for every transaction within the ledger. From the multi-company perspective, the setup and management of multiple business units has been simplified with this release. So whereas previously there are a number of different things, steps that needed to be followed to create new business units, these have all been brought together in one function that allow you to create new business units, copy business units, and quickly delete and manage those. And again, this is not necessarily new for this version of SunSystems, but it's probably worth reiterating the unified ledger concept and the ability to have up to 10 different additional ledgers which can be used for a number of different purposes, whether it's for recording budget, transactions, forecasts, commitments, or even for adjustment transactions, IFRS adjustments. That is, of course, still valid within Infor10. And on the technology side, as we said, the new reporting engine for the standard listing reports, in addition to the the vision tools that we're all used to, this now gives us the ability to export the standard listing reports. For example, our trial balance, we can export that directly to a PDF or Excel from within the system. Because this uses Microsoft SQL reporting services behind the scenes, we now have the ability to schedule reports. So any standard reports within SunSystem can be set up on a schedule. These can then, notification can then be sent out by email when the reports have completed. So we can schedule reports to run overnight or at a time that is most convenient for us. And in terms of modifying the standard listing reports within SunSystems, we now have a easy-to-use, simplified graphical designer for doing this. And as we said previously, with regards to the web enablement, the fact that we now have a browser-based client may, in some circumstances, eliminate the need to deploy terminal servers or Citrix servers to give access to remote locations. Obviously, we need to consider the bandwidth when we're talking about running a browser-based client, but the objective is that this is something that can be run over relatively low bandwidth connections, and it's quick to deploy. And as we said, and finally, in relation to the Infor platform, the new integration platform and workflow engine, we now have the ability to design workflow around any event in SunSystems. This could, for example, be a business process that requires maybe an approval or authorization stage. Somebody needs to set up an authorization stage on a payment run or a journal authorization. We can do this using Infor workflow, or it may simply be just generating alerts or monitoring for certain events within the system. So if somebody has modified the bank details of a supplier, maybe we can fire off an email to the accounts payable manager to say these bank details have been modified. If somebody creates a new chart of accounts that meets a certain set of criteria, again, we can either send a pop-up alert to a relevant user group, or we can notify them in real time via email. So those were, I guess, some of the key things, some of the key features of the new Infor10 release. Things to consider if we're thinking of embarking on an implementation of Infor10. Now, there are possibly two different scenarios. One, you may be upgrading from a previous version of SunSystems, or you may be implementing this from scratch. If we're upgrading from a previous version of SunSystems, again, there may be a couple of different scenarios and a couple of different sets of tasks that will need to be followed depending on which version of SunSystems you're currently running. So if we're on the SunSystems version 4 platform, the migration to Infor10 will require some data migration. So it's really a data migration exercise, the same as if we would have been going from version 4 to version 5. Other important things to consider if you're running SunSystems version 4 are we using the Sun Business modules, purchasing, sales, inventory. Again, if those modules are in use, we can upgrade to Infor10, but there will be some additional work that will be required to bring across those sales definitions, price books, those kinds of things. If you're on a version of SunSystems that's version 5.2 or higher, then in that case, because the data structures are relatively similar to the Infor10 product, then there's a direct data upgrade path. So you can upgrade in place from version 5 to version 10. So whether you're on 5.2, 5.3, 5.4, there is a direct upgrade path available to Infor10. If you are a version 5 customer, because of the changes to the reporting engine, one thing we do need to consider is, for example, if you have any custom reports that were written with the old Actuate reporting tool, and typically these would include things such as remittance reports or maybe customized check reports. And again, these are things that would need to be rewritten slightly to work with the new SQL reporting engine. And of course, it may seem like an obvious question, but one of the principal things we need to consider before upgrading is how much data do we have, how many business units, how many databases, and quite often, as a system has evolved over time, there may be test databases or companies that have been set up for testing integrations with other systems. It's worth asking, does the data set that we currently have, could this be cleaned up before we embark on an upgrade? So there may be things we can do to clear down companies, there may be data that could be archived, and it's generally a good idea to consider doing that cleanup exercise before you embark on the upgrade proper. The reason being, of course, that that will then reduce the time required, whether it's a data migration or whether it's a direct upgrade of the data. But if there's data that could have been cleaned up beforehand, then we can obviously reduce the time required during the upgrade project. And some general questions, not necessarily specific to people upgrading, but again, these are things that I think we've come across in our own experience working with customers on upgrade projects over the last few months. There may be an international aspect to the implementation. Do we have offices in other countries? Do we have other foreign language versions of SunSystems? Are those language versions available right now on SunSystems? Do we have other third-party add-ons, banking tools, bank reconciliation, payment tools? We maybe have some things for local statutory requirements, withholding tax in Argentina. Maybe there's some things in the Italian office for the for the monthly returns that need to be addressed. Are they compatible with Infor10? So these are things to be considered if you have international offices. With regards to the web enablement, it's also worth noting that you don't have to have the SharePoint integration switched on from day one. You can use the web client within SunSystems without any SharePoint integration. It can be run directly from a link across the network. And of course, there may be additional hardware requirements. It may be that the nature of your environment needs to change slightly to reflect the new requirements for Infor10. And obviously, in that case, we would need to have a chat with your IT department, and we would put together the best practice approach for doing that. And finally, if we have integrations to other systems, we'd maybe have integrations to other trading platforms, front office systems, other reporting data warehouses, these kinds of things. Again, we need to consider, is there work involved in, if we upgrade the SunSystems installation, do we need to do any additional work on these integrations? If we're looking at file formats, do the file formats that these other systems provide, are they still compatible with SunSystems? If we're providing information into a data warehouse, is there information that has changed in the SunSystems tables that maybe we need to update in our data warehouse? These are all things that we would address with you in detail when talking about an upgrade. And then finally, as I said, in addition to the core SunSystems enhancements, the additional components or additional Infor10 components or additional components that make up the Infor10 suite, and these principally are the set of tools for ION, the new integration suite, and you can just see here they're comprised of a number of different things: workflow, event management, Connect, which is really the integration platform for sharing information across systems. And it's also worth noting that there are connectors to other ERP systems already available out of the box, and Infor is working on developing other easily configurable connectors to other applications. So again, we will cover all of these things in detail in subsequent sessions, but really for the purposes of the introduction, it's worth noting that these are some of the additional components that Infor10 brings to the table. Okay, so what I'll do now is we'll just switch over quickly and we'll run through, just give you an overview in the demo machine of some of these different components and how they look in real life. So what we will have a look at is we will take a look at the new look and feel of SunSystems 6.1. We'll have a look at how some of the standard reports have changed very quickly, the standard listing reports we were talking about, and then just very quickly give you a look at some of the new functionality we talked about in Infor10 Workspace. We'll just take a look at what that looks like, how that can be configured. Infor on Desk, the tool for configuring workflow and alerts. So I'll switch across to the demo machine. We will run through some of those things very quickly, and then what I'll do is I'll switch back and I'll ask Emma to open the session up for any questions and answers. Okay, so the first thing that we will have a look at is just obviously this is the Infor10 client. This is the full desktop client, so this is really the evolution of the SunSystems desktop client. This may be familiar if you're already using version 5, but essentially the changes in Infor10 are really an improved navigation. So the front screen has been cleaned up considerably. We now have different tabs, perhaps in some way similar, harking back to SunSystems 4 with the different modules across the top and then the different functions within there. You have the ability to have different tabs, so you can obviously open up different functions and have multiple tabs open at the same time. So you can very quickly flip between different functionality, different functions within the different modules. You also have the ability, SunSystems shortcuts, quick access to all of the existing functions, but you also have the ability to actually free text search on any of the functions within the system. So if you're not necessarily sure what the three-letter shortcut is, if you type in REP or you start to type in report, then obviously the menu items on the screen will automatically reduce to reflect whatever it is that you're typing in. If you type in account, then obviously we'll get all of the account related functions or all the functions that contain the word account up on the screen in one go. So the objective is really just to make life a little bit easier for people within the system. You don't necessarily need to know all of the shortcuts to find your way around. A cleaner user interface, tabbed, and you also have the ability to create favorites. So if you have a set of functions that you access on a regular basis, it's very quick to just add your favorite functions into your own tab, so you have all of the things to hand in one single place, so you can very quickly find all of your core functions. And you can also add in addition to SunSystems functions, you can also add links to intranet pages, external reports, external applications, and they will all open up within the Infor10 user interface. Okay, so that's the sort of the desktop client and the improved interface. The other thing we mentioned that had changed is the core listing reports, so things like the trial balance, the account listing, journal listing, financial tables, these kinds of things. The way you run these within the system is still largely the same, but the options you have for outputting these are slightly different and somewhat improved. So you can run your standard trial balance. I'll just leave that running a second, but then once that's run, you have obviously you have some additional options for exporting that out into Excel. You can export those into a PDF. You can email the reports, and as we said, the other thing that you can do with these reports now is you can have these set up on a schedule so that they can be run overnight, month end, or if there's certain reports need to be run at month end, you can set that up on a schedule, and then you can have email notifications sent out when those are completed. I'll just give that a couple more seconds. Yeah. Okay, well, I'll maybe come back to that in a second when that's finished generating. Let's just switch across to the report designer. So we said, the ability to design these reports, and this has been somewhat simplified. So we have a simple graphical report designer for doing this. So depending on the entity that we're reporting on, we'll have all of the available fields in the report designer ready, and we can simply drag and drop these onto our report. We can then configure things like parameters, drop downs, drill down, and so on. And it's really designed to be relatively user-friendly. It's not really a developer tool. It's something that people who are familiar with the data structures within SunSystems, they can get up to speed pretty quickly in using this report designer. Okay, there's our trial balance. So once that's loaded, obviously we have a slightly cleaner look to the report, and obviously, as I said, we can quickly export that out either to Excel or we can export that out to PDF. So here comes the Excel version. So again, it's just a quick way of exporting out the reports with all of the numbers if you wanted to do some additional analysis, or if you just want that in a format that can be quickly sent out via email to a colleague or whoever. Likewise, the PDF version, same sort of thing. You can just quickly export that out into a PDF. Okay, so enhancements to navigation, changes to the core reporting engine. The other thing that we mentioned was the Infor Workspace. I'll just switch across to the Workspace. So as we said, Infor Workspace is essentially a single point of entry. It's an Infor portal that is built using SharePoint technology, but as you can see, it's been branded specifically to work with SunSystems, and it contains a number of different components. The idea here is that you would have one single portal, and it's a role-based application, so depending on who you log in as, then you may have different dashboards and alerts that appear. So you may have, again, configured web parts for things like currency exchange rates, or you may have business intelligence widgets in here giving you an overview of certain key reporting metrics. And you'd have a tab for SunSystems where if we go in here, it will log us into the web client of SunSystems, and depending on what other applications you may have installed, you may have a link to your expenses system, you may have a link to performance management, CRM, vision, web reporting. All of those things can be accessed from a single point of entry, and the idea being that once you've signed on to the portal, then you do not need to re-sign in again to any of the other applications. It's all in one place, so you can get the information that you need when you need it in a single place. And then finally, we talked about Infor, and again we'll go into this in more detail in other sessions, but Infor is the integration and workflow platform. So in here we can do a number of different things. We can configure integrations with other systems using connectors. We can also have alerts we talked about, so we may be monitoring certain events within the system. So a very simple example, if somebody has deleted a supplier, so this alert is just monitoring any time a supplier record has been deleted from a given business unit within SunSystems. We can define a number of conditions, and then once this has happened, then we can maybe send out an email to a group of predefined people, and we can send out a message saying the supplier has been permanently deleted. And again, these can be set up on any sort of data object within SunSystems, whether it's static data, chart of accounts, analysis codes. So if somebody creates a new cost center as an analysis code, maybe because you also need to create that information somewhere else, again, you can fire off an email alert if somebody creates a new project code. Maybe you need to go and set up the project code in the expense system as well, so people can start recording time against that project or expenses against that project. Then you can configure an alert to do that. The next step is you may actually want to go into those other systems and create that information automatically. So instead of just creating an alert that would appear either as a pop-up or an email, there's maybe some workflow which then goes in using a connector to the expense system and can actually create that project in the expense management system directly. So by monitoring for different events, we can either fire off simple alerts, or we can actually generate workflow for more complex scenarios. We may have, for example, processes that require some kind of authorization. Maybe we wish to put in a workflow authorization on a payment run. We can be relatively simple, a journal authorization that just allows us to generate an email notification when journals that meet a certain criteria have been posted. And then in this case, there's simply two possible actions for the person authorizing: accept and reject. If the journal is accepted, then the journal is posted and a message is generated. If the journal is not authorized, then maybe we can say we're going to put the journal on hold, and a message will get sent out saying the journal has not been approved and has been posted to the journal hold file. So the idea is that this is a graphical interface where we can quickly generate different kinds of workflow, and these can be as simple or as complex as needs dictate. So we may even have a slightly more complex example generating workflow on a payment run, for example. So you can see here, I won't go through all of this in detail, but we can be quite complex in the number of different things we can do with a workflow engine. We can send out messages, but we can also interact with other applications. So the platform we use for doing that is Infor, and as I say, we will be covering Infor in more detail in subsequent sessions. Okay, so I think that is essentially all I wanted to show you in this brief introductory session. So what I'll now ask my colleague Emma to do is to open up the session, open up the lines for any questions you may have. So if you have any questions on anything you've seen, please feel free to ask us a question. Emma, could you just open the lines for questions, please?
Yes, Richard, I have done. There are currently no questions or hands raised.
So we'll just see if there are any questions. If you don't have any questions at this time, but if there's something you'd like to ask us about individually, or if there's something that comes to mind later on, I'll leave these contact details up on the screen for a few minutes. So if you do have any questions, please drop either myself, Gary, or Emma an email, or you can call us at the number on the screen.
Hi, Richard. We have one hand raised. Would you like me to read out the question?
Yeah, so we have one question.
Yeah. The question is, the attendee would like to know, they don't currently have Vision. Do they not need Vision anymore if they have Infor 10?
Okay, so the question for the rest of the audience that was asked was, we're not currently using Vision. If we implement Infor 10, does this mean we no longer require Vision? No, I think what we were saying is the reporting engine in Infor 10 is really just an enhancement to the standard listing report. So if you already use things like financial tables, financial analysis, TBs, journal listings, account listings, this is an improvement to those kinds of reports. If you're already using Vision, then of course Vision is one of the the principal reporting tools that sits on top of SunSystems, and there are a number of enhancements to Vision as well, which we didn't cover in this session. But again, you would expect to carry on using Vision, and again, Vision has been fully web-enabled and can be deployed across SharePoint. If you're not currently using Vision, then my advice would be I would probably start using Vision. But Infor 10, just to clarify, is not going to negate the need for anybody who was thinking of implementing Vision or rolling out Vision. Infor 10 is not a replacement for Vision. It's an upgrade to the core SunSystems tools, together with a number of additional sets of functionality beside that. So Vision is very much alive and kicking, and Vision is still I guess the de facto reporting tool for producing management reports, ad hoc reports into Excel, all of these kinds of things. So hopefully that answers the question.
Thank you, Richard. There are currently no more questions.
Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, if there are any questions, I'll give you another couple of minutes, and please raise your hand or drop a text message to Emma. But if you don't have any questions, then I'd just like to thank you very much for attending this afternoon, and we look forward to seeing you on some of the subsequent sessions. Thank you.
Hi, Richard. I have one more question.
Yeah, we have another question.
Yeah, from the same attendee. He would like to know, can you show how 3 currencies work in Infor 10?
Okay. Yeah, so the question was, can we show how the 3 different currencies work within Infor 10? We can certainly take a quick look. I'm not sure if I've got an example set up, but I'll just show you the fields on the screen within the application, and then we can see how that effectively would kick in, for example, during a ledger entry or transaction entry. So if you want, I can just very quickly flip back to the Infor machine. So I'll just check first of all that I'm using a business unit that has third currency switched on. Okay, so if we have a look at this company here, the ALC Finance Company, we can see value 1 is obviously our base currency, which is GBP in this case. Value 2 is always the transaction currency, so whatever currency the transaction took place in. And in this case, this company has defined value 3, the reporting currency, as being euros. So effectively, this comes into play if you're looking at a ledger entry. So if you're making a transaction entry into the system, you don't necessarily have to enter the third currency. But if we go back to our business unit setup, the rules say that whatever is posted to the ledger, then for value 3 we will also always calculate a euro equivalent. So this means I don't have to type in a euro value on every transaction, but whatever I enter on any transaction in the system, the value 3 euro equivalent will always be generated. Now another thing to remember briefly is we have this concept of pivot. So do we pivot on the base currency or do we pivot on the transaction currency? In this example, the business unit is set up to pivot on the base currency. So what that means is that the euro reporting value will always be calculated in relation to the GBP base currency. So obviously the implications of that are we need to set up the exchange rates between between GBP and Euro to ensure that the reporting currency is always calculated correctly automatically. See if I can find a quick one here, but so we can see on this in this example very quickly we have here a ledger entry form that has obviously our transaction currency on there, our base currency which will be automatically calculated, and then the reporting currency which is USD, which again is shown for information purposes, but which will be automatically, the value will be automatically calculated when we save the line on the journal. Just have a quick look. So you can see here, again, I'm not going to go through and complete the entire entry, but you can see as soon as I entered an amount in euros, 1,000 euros in this case on the first line, as soon as I save that line, then obviously the system has calculated the GBP equivalent for my base currency and obviously the equivalent USD, and it's automatically picked up the rate of 1.35, which is presumably what has been defined for this accounting period, and it's put in the report amount into the value 3 column. So you can see again that's not something that's modifiable, it's automatically generated by the system. And that is calculated automatically on ledger entry, ledger import, and if, for example, you went into an account inquiry and you had a look at one of those accounts, then you should also see the reporting currency amounts in there as well, so the euro amounts using that rate of 1.53. So the reporting currency comes in, is generated automatically on transaction entry, whether it's a manual entry and import, and then once that's automatically calculated, then you can then report off that using Vision or using any of the reporting tools within SunSystems itself. The other benefit of that, of course, is that you can run a standard trial balance directly in the second base or reporting currency if you so wished, once that has been defined. So by using the reporting currency you can just run your TB directly in USD, euros, whatever that may be. So hopefully that answers the question for the attendee that asked that. But again, if you've got any more, if you'd like to see that process in a little bit more detail, then please drop me a line and we'll be happy to go through a more detailed example with you.
Thanks, Richard. There are no more questions.
Okay, so I'll leave these details up on the screen for a few